Hey, James here. I have been going over the research as of late with AI, and it interests me, so I'm going to bring it to you because if you're watching this, this is of interest to you as well. And it revolves around memory. You see, AI right now has a computationally expensive process by which every single document or piece of information that you provide to the AI is kept in memory. And that can be very expensive. In fact, you can see the pricing tables for AI and how expensive it actually gets when you start using, 28,000 or even 2 million tokens. So, one of the ways that a lot of the experts have determined how to solve AI's memory is by doing what humans do. You see, we don't actually keep everything that's ever said to us ever all the time in our memory. It's impossible. So what our minds do is they create summary notes, little pieces of information by which to recall a conversation or otherwise, and then they store that whole conversation and they wait for a trigger, some means by which to recall those little mini notes we made on an experience we had, and then we're able to go back and actively retrieve all that information. Now, with AI taking the same approach, you can actively unload tons and tons of conversations that it would normally have to keep in memory, and that could go into an archival state, and instead the AI will create a summary of those conversations into a little small text document. And that could be tiny, tiny amounts of kilobytes. And you can have a conversation with the AI where it will proceed to look like it's having a forever conversation with you, where it's able to remember things you talked about 2, 3, 5, 10 years ago. And the reason why is that it's referencing these little mini notes. And only when you say, hey, Claude, for instance, now this doesn't exist right now, but this is something that the researchers are working on. Say, hey, do you remember that conversation we had 2 weeks ago with George? And then it'd provide a mini summary that it took of that, and you would take that summary and you'd say, yeah, that's the one. Could you tell me more about that? I need to for a presentation or something. And then it goes and pulls that data out of the archive and into the active memory state where it's able to talk with you. And it'll appear as if it always had it in active memory state, but clearly that wasn't the case. And that would solve a lot of the memory problems. And along the line of solving the memory problems, you can have computationally expensive grounded experts work with a generalist AI with reasoning, and you can achieve amazing results. One of the pet projects I've been working on is taking all the documentation from a particular vendor that I love working with and throwing that into a very large database where an AI, not as intelligent, is very well grounded on that help documentation material. And the reason why I'm doing this is that I know whenever you're trying to do something, you always wish you had an expert who had all that knowledge go before you and teach you how to do it, because it allows you to get there very quickly. But the problem is that when you're doing things for a hobby, you kind of have to forge your own path. And part of forging your own path means entering into new territory. So I had a thought process by which if I take all of the vendor's help documentation and shove it into a grounded AI, then when I give it instructions where I'm trying to accomplish this by moving data from point A to point B, for instance, how would I go about doing it? How would I format the JSON data? How would I go about? And the AI is able to provide step-by-step instructions, in a way being the expert to blaze the trail ahead of me, which I find very handy. On the other hand, that grounded AI doesn't have any thinking. It doesn't have any intelligence. It just figures out like a zero shot how to do the process. And though that can be useful, obviously there's going to be much better ways if some thought was put into it. And this is where a generalist AI like Claude from Anthropic, which is using Sonnet 3.5 new, which has that thinking capability, or GPT-4o1 preview, can think step by step and then use the grounded AI tool, well, I should say the grounded AI as a tool that it could then reference to form its final answer. So in other words, you give the task to say Claude 3.5 Sonnet new or GPT-01 preview. It starts thinking through, hey, how would I, as a generalist AI, approach this? And then once it's thought out its process, it then says, okay, this is what I'm trying to achieve to the specialist AI as a tool. That specialist AI consults the documentation, constructs the step-by-step methodology, feeds that back into, I'll say Claude, just for simplification here, Claude, and then Claude can review that and determine, hey, how close was I to the mark? Do I need to refine anything? Are there any optimizations? And then it could either feed that back into the tool to get a better setup, or it could say, you know, this looks really good. It matches the user's intent. Here you go. And suddenly, instead of having to build an airplane while it's flying, you kind of get handed chunks of an airplane that you could just plug and chug into place. And that's incredibly powerful. And that's something I've been enjoying this past week as a hobby, building that specific AI so that way Claude could use it as a tool. And I found that quite enjoyable. And if you're curious how I'm doing that, then let me know in the comments and maybe I'll turn that into a video. Anywho, this is James Take. Catch you next week. Peace out.